Hello, Revere, and welcome to the Revere Veterans and Community Show. Today we have a real special guest. His name is Evan Falchuk. He's running for governor in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Thank you, sir.
Evan, thank you for coming on our show.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I'm going to call you governor, so anybody that's running for governor is going to be called governor.
That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on.
Thanks.
Before we start, give us a little education about yourself.
Sure. I'm from here in Massachusetts. I'm 44 years old, even though, as we were talking before, maybe I look a little younger, but it's true, I'm 44. My wife, Felicia, and I have 3 kids who are 14, 11, and 7.
Mention their ages?
14.
I mean their names.
Oh, they're Brenna, Colin, and Lydia. And they go to the public schools near our home, and they're great kids.
What city do you come from?
Newton, Mass. So we live in the part of Newton called Auburndale, which is out in the western part of it. And I've been a business person.
Tell us something about your business.
I was the president and senior executive of a healthcare company here in Boston called Best Doctors. That is an employee benefit, helps people make sure they've got the right diagnosis when they're sick. And during my time there, we grew from 9 employees to over 600 employees. Wow. So it really was great, and the company still is an amazing business. I started this new political party called United Independent Party in 2013 and also announced my run for governor on that platform.
Right. Could you tell us a little about that party exactly? What makes that different, for example, if there is a little difference between, let's say, the Democratic and Republican Party?
The political process today just does not represent people anymore. It's become wrapped up in things that most people say, I don't recognize that as being what it used to be. And so I believe the only way to really change it is to found a new structure, to have a lasting independent voice in our politics. So I founded the United Independent Party based on some very simple ideas.
When was that, in 2013?
Everybody is equal, everybody's civil rights have to be protected, and the government's got to spend our money wisely. Most people, that's the combination of views that they have, but they don't think that either of the two parties really represents that anymore. So the vision is that you could become an official party once you get past 3% of the vote in a statewide election. We're going to do much better than that in November. But once you're an official party, it makes it a lot easier to start putting lots of new candidates on the ballot. And in this election, more than half of our representatives in the legislature are running unopposed. So we've got a democratic process that isn't really working. So in 2016, when we put lots of new United Independent Party candidates on the ballot, we're going to have an opportunity for some real change.
So that are your future plans?
Absolutely. We're focused on winning this election. The Falchuk-Jennings ticket, the United Independent Party ticket, winning, certainly getting past that 3%. The next step is 2016.
Right. I want to go back to your community. Besides doing the work at the hospital and getting things for diagnosis, what else can you tell us?
Well, my wife is getting her master's in social work at Boston College. And
excellent school, excellent.
It's a great school and a great program, and so much of what social work is about is working with people who are in need of help, and there's such great need today that's out there. And so much of what we end up seeing in the work, both federally and at the state level of the government, just doesn't actually fulfill the promises that we say we're going to make. So you think about veteran services, for example. There's always, on Memorial Day and Veterans Day, and any opportunity people get, the wonderful opportunity to pay tribute to the people who have served our country, and it's good and it's right that we should do that. But we've got to make sure that the funding is there, and that the resources are made available from the state and the federal government to support veterans. There's about 1,200 homeless veterans in Massachusetts. There shouldn't be any.
Exactly.
There shouldn't be a single one.
Right.
And so there are programs that are not funded sufficiently to help make sure that veterans are able to transition into permanent housing. It should be the highest priority.
Governor, if there's any veteran out there that is homeless, could he contact you if he needed some help?
Absolutely. We connect you to resources or provide whatever help we can. I just, as an American, I feel responsibility.
Can you give him a phone number so they can put it out there?
Yeah, well, two things. Go to the Falchuk2014.org website, or just call us at 617-874-3826. That's the Falchuk for Governor campaign headquarters. It's really important that we're able to do this. One of the things that has motivated me in this campaign is seeing the way our political process is so broken in our country today. When the government has been shut down repeatedly, when they shut it down, they stop providing services to many veterans for certain programs. And it's hard for me to understand how that's even possible. One of the things I've proposed is that the state of Massachusetts has to create a dedicated fund so that in the event that the government decides to shut down again, that veteran services that are currently provided by the federal government aren't interrupted.
You've heard the rumors about what's going on with the VA. Out there, they're getting bonuses for things they don't do. A veteran's got to wait a year. Some of them never live to see that year.
Yeah, and especially around mental health services. I mean,
Exactly.
these are hugely important areas, and the VA does a terrific job with health care and making it available to people, but there isn't enough resource available, certainly, again, when it comes to mental health services. One of the programs that, to me, was amazing was stopped, and again, veterans are not victims. These are heroic people that have served our country and have done great things, but when they're in need, we've got an obligation. We have a real obligation to
Some
help.
of them are worse off at home than they were overseas, really.
Yeah.
They got better help overseas than they did when they came home.
Right. Or you see situations where people, because, in prior wars, people that would be wounded might not survive. Today, because of the advances in medical technology, you can survive. But there are so many stories of people that have gotten hooked on some painkiller while they were being treated, and they come back and they end up being dishonorably discharged because of it, and they can't get benefits. Well, this isn't right. This isn't right. And the extent to which we don't talk openly about these issues and decide just to we can say we support veterans, but not walk the walk in the real way. That's what's missing from our politics.
Right. I would like to thank one veteran, if I may.
Please.
Maybe you saw him on TV a couple of days ago. He was given the Medal of Honor by President Obama, right here from Nashua, New Hampshire.
Absolutely.
Ryan Pitts, thank you. Thank you for your service. And this is from a World War II veteran to you. Thank you very much, and God bless you, Brian.
Very inspiring.
Yep.
And just thank you also, Ryan, for your service. Wherever I can look, Ryan, thank you for your service.
Right. So we do have good heroes, but I got to tell you, I go into Boston sometimes on Court Street.
Yeah.
Where they have a veteran shelter.
Yeah.
And I think it was I don't know if it was this winter that passed or a year ago. I saw some of them laying out in the street near the vents that come up from the MBTA, so they can warm themselves. They couldn't go inside because they had alcoholic problems. Some of them, when they were given morphine to cure their pain, became addicted to morphine. So
this is a problem of homelessness generally, and also certainly for veterans. Now, one of the things we've proposed in my campaign about how we really end homelessness is to make sure that there are more homes built in the first place. When you think about people coming back from World War II, one of the realities of the American landscape is that we were constructing lots of starter homes all across the country, including here in Massachusetts. We still have a lot of those homes available. But we don't build new homes, especially ones that are inexpensive, that are affordable for young people to live in, or for older people who want to sell a home that they lived in and raised a family in and want to live someplace a little bit smaller. It is because state policy doesn't encourage cities and towns to allow for more homes to be built.
But, Governor, I got to tell you, the city of Revere does a lot for its veterans. We take care of our veterans right here. If they're homeless, we try to provide them with a home. We try to keep them off the street. Sometimes they don't want to go off the street, but that's not our fault. That's their fault. But we do try to help them. We build low-income housing for the people like seniors. They can live. We got a brand new one coming up on Broadway, Revere. That's in the works.
It's fantastic, and there's so many cities that are like Revere that are forward-thinking in this way, but not every city and town has that same approach to these issues. So there's so much more that can be done, and it requires being able to think strategically and actually act in those ways. We run into too many situations where you hear people say there's not enough money. There's just not enough money available to help with these issues. Well, there's money. If the government would spend its money wisely, there's money.
Right. I was going to say, we have a mayor here, Mayor Dan Rizzo, who focuses not in the past, but in the future, and he's doing a lot for the city of Revere. He wants to bring in a casino here, which we hope to have in the future. We do, because that would bring in a lot of money for us.
Sure.
It's going to be voted on by not only by the people of East Boston or Revere. It's going to be voted on the Commonwealth. But you have to agree with me on this. Money coming in would help the taxpayer reduce the taxes that they would be paying, because the city and towns and the state would have the money. If we don't get the money, we still got to have the same people, the same infrastructure. Where are we going to get it from? We're going to have to raise your taxes.
That's right. And I think the problem that we've had with this whole issue of the casinos, which is going to be on the ballot and a very confusing ballot question, is that we voted. The legislature decided on a way to deal with the question of whether we should have casinos in Massachusetts. Cities and towns had an opportunity to vote on this. The democratic process played out. And now, this is one of the problems in our democracy today. It used to be And the way it should work in a democracy is that one side wins and one side loses. But when it's over, we go together to get forward together as Americans.
That's right.
And what's happening
We
today,
unite.
We unite. And what's happening today in America is that one side wins, and then the other side says, well, let's figure out how to keep fighting. And they say, let's either file a lawsuit or let's try to repeal the law. It's what's making our federal government shut down repeatedly.
I'd like to ask you a question, and I want you to be an opponent. And you're going to be against it on this question.
All right.
Okay, that way it is. I want the casino here. I do. I want the money coming in. I want the infrastructure, the roads fixed up, the schools fixed up, the library, the police, the fire department. You're against the casino, let's say.
Yeah.
You're going to use the same road that I'm going to use to ride on. Exactly. You would have nice roads.
Yeah.
Your kids would have nice schools. Your kids would have nice libraries. You would have nice protection from the police, the fire department. Why would anybody want to be against it?
There are people who raise objections to these things
Traffic,
that we'll talk
crime.
about. Right, all those issues.
Right,
and
but these are issues that would be resolved with money.
Well, this is true, but here's the problem: is that argument, we already had that argument. The legislature decided on a way of doing it. The cities and towns voted. So we had that argument. This is democracy.
Voted twice.
They voted twice. So this is supposed to be democracy. And democracy means when one side of the argument wins, the other side has to move forward together as part of the same system. But when we allow for people to say, well, you know what, I lost the argument twice or 3 times, and now we're going to continue it for a 4th time, it gums up the works, and it undermines the whole idea of
democracy.
It
does, right.
And that to me is that's the thing that has to stop. I know there's a lot of political gain to be had, and the parties are great at this. The establishment is really good at this. It's saying let's perpetuate these fights as long as possible because it gets people riled up. But I think that leadership isn't about getting people riled up about every issue. It's about saying let's move forward. Let's have a plan to go forward and agree that we are all Americans in this together, and it's time to embrace our democracy and move forward.
Now I would like to talk about a subject that's dear to my heart. Being a senior, about seniors. What exactly, as governor, would you like to see the state do for our seniors? Now, before you say anything, let me tell you, we need new van in our city to transport the seniors. We need new, as a matter of fact, we need a new senior center is what we really need in there. Someday you're going to be a senior yourself.
I hope
you got
so.
parents that are senior. Well, if you're 44, your parents got to be seniors unless they got married at 10.
No. They didn't.
Okay.
That much I can confirm. They did not.
Okay.
They were of
so
age.
You're a senior. What would you like to see?
I've visited with many senior centers, and one of the challenges that senior centers face across the state is insufficient funding. I mean, it's a repeated story.
Right.
There's not enough money for these kinds of programs. The state provides senior centers about a little bit more than $7 per senior per town in funding to support the programs that
How
they
much?
do.
Just 7?
More than 7, just over $7. And it's amazing when you see those numbers.
Excuse me, is that for the year?
Yeah, per year per senior that lives in the town based on the census of that town. So when you see that, you say, well, how do these senior centers operate? And it's a challenge for them. Now, I've heard many political leaders say how important seniors are to the Commonwealth, how much of an obligation we have to help our seniors, but the money isn't there. Now, the State House, there's a $9 million renovation of the governor's office going on right now. $9 million to renovate an office. I think that money would be better spent on supporting programs for seniors and veterans and education and other programs. There are large tax breaks. I think of them as subsidies to big companies that go out all the time.
But that's not only the governor's fault because he gets the approval from the legislature.
Absolutely.
So it's the whole bunch there.
Absolutely right, Morris, and that's why I founded a new party. Okay. You know, the establishment today needs to be replaced. If a majority of them are running unopposed, and a majority of them think it's okay to fund these programs in that way, and to prioritize in that way, they've got to be replaced.
I have a good question for you. We have an income tax in Massachusetts. I believe New York is 9%, if my memory serves me right.
I think so.
Texas has none.
It's true.
I think New Hampshire has none. Or do they?
They don't have an income tax.
They don't have. How do they survive?
Well, I can't speak for Texas or New Hampshire. There always has to be a recognition.
That means they have a high real estate tax?
They may have higher real estate taxes. and
either way, they make it up.
They figure out a way to make it up, or they provide less services, which is certainly the case in a state like New Hampshire versus what we have available in Massachusetts. Here's the thing, and I remind voters of this all the time. We have to be willing to pay for the government we say we want. So if we want government to do all the things that it does, and we do, then we have to figure out a way to pay for it. And if government is going to run in a very inefficient way, then government has a responsibility to reallocate the way it spends its money to provide those services. And if not, then we have to be able to go to voters and say we need more money to pay for it. But the first responsibility of government has to be to provide service efficiently and not to waste money on things that shouldn't be wasted on. If only 3% of the government's spending was wasted, that's $1 billion a year. They just rushed through the legislature an authorization to pay $1 billion to expand the convention center in Boston. That's a lot of money that I think would be much better spent on the over 400 structurally deficient roads and bridges we have in Massachusetts, the total underfunding of programs for education, the public schools in our state, and so many other priorities for seniors and veterans across the Commonwealth. But the priorities are wrong.
The priorities could be wrong, but I look at it this way. If $1 billion is spent for renovation, that means there are going to be a lot of jobs available. That means people are going to be working. People are going to be making money, and taxes will be coming out of money. So some of that $1 billion would be funneling back to the cities and towns.
And here's the challenge. So in a world in which the majority of legislators are running unopposed, in which the last statewide election last year, the 2013 race for the Senate, only 27% of voters voted. When a majority of voters aren't enrolled in the Democratic or Republican parties, we don't even really have the ability at a statewide level to have a really good conversation about should that be the right way to spend the money or not. I happen to think it's not the best way to spend the money, even though the things you're saying are true. Of course, some of that money will come back in tax revenue. I think we would get a much better deal if we invested that money in schools and roads and bridges and these things. But the problem is we don't end up having those conversations because there's no accountability.
But looking at it from a devil's advocate, you know, making the convention center, let's say, because everything has a pro and con, but let's say the convention center, that will bring in a lot of people from outside the Commonwealth in there.
It may, and it may not. We don't know. I mean, there are people who say it will, and there's people who say it will not. The trouble is, again, in our democratic process, instead of there being a robust public debate as to whether this is a good investment or not, it ends up being rushed through, and there isn't even a lot of public discussion on this issue. I don't know who's behind it exactly. All I know is that the state is going to go and borrow $1 billion and is going to pay back bondholders. We're going to make money off of this to expand one project in Massachusetts when there are so many other needs. I think a better democratic process, separate from whatever the outcome is one in which there's broad-based understanding of how it is and why it is we're spending the money we're spending. And that doesn't happen today. You see too much of, and when I meet voters, why should I vote? What's the difference? The system is rigged anyway. Who cares how I vote? What does my vote even matter? And I find that very worrisome as an American, as someone who believes very strongly in the democratic process.
Right, but I got to tell you, if I'm correct on this one, when President Kennedy ran against Richard Nixon, and Nixon lost because Kennedy won that election, it was by 1 vote per precinct. If Nixon had got the 1 vote going the other way, it would have been him being president.
Yep.
So every vote, that does count.
They all count.
Even though you say, well, my vote doesn't count, believe me, folks, it does count.
It does.
Right.
It does, and I find myself, as I meet voters across the Commonwealth, reminding people of it all the time because there's so much cynicism. People just don't have a lot of trust and faith in the system, but they have to, you know, and when you don't vote, someone else is, and those decisions end up being made by somebody else.
That's right.
And so when you complain, which voters do, you got to take responsibility to participate. Now, your viewers vote, I am sure, in very large numbers.
I'll be honest with you. The city of Revere, second to none, and I do mean second to none. We voted twice. The first time we voted, the second time we voted even more. We're going to be voting in November, and I guarantee you the November vote in the city of Revere, the ones that are going to be voting yes, is going to outnumber the negatives by more than 2 to 1.
Yeah.
And it's going to be higher.
And that's democracy.
Right.
And so for people who vote, it's so important that they also make sure that their friends and family who don't or haven't, that they vote. It doesn't matter how they vote, just vote.
The difference between us, I'm speaking about American Revere, is even though you and I may disagree on issues, supposedly.
Yeah.
I will accept the decision if you win, and you will accept the decision if I win.
Correct.
We don't go killing each other like we see now over in countries in the Middle East and in Africa. There's only about, what, 2 continents that are at peace, Australia and the Antarctica.
Yeah.
South America, problems.
Right.
North America, United States and Canada, none.
We don't realize how lucky and fortunate we are in the United States to have the things we have, and we should never take it for granted. Never.
Right. I look at every day I get up, I put on the TV, the Middle East. If it ain't one country, it's another one.
Yeah.
Africa, if it ain't one country, it's another one.
Yeah.
South America, if it isn't one country, it's another
Yeah.
one. I mean, I've never remembered a peaceful day since the day I was born that I became to recognize the wars going on in there.
Yeah,
And neither have you.
It's the human condition. You know, it's history of humanity is filled with this kind of problem. The incredible thing about America is that some smart people got together and said, we're going to create some place that's going to be different.
And we did.
We did. But it requires that in each generation that we renew and recognize our responsibility to carry that forward. Not voting, not participating undermines that. And doing creative and entrepreneurial things like saying, you know, I don't like the way this system is working, and I'm going to create something that we can get lots of new people involved in our system. That's what the American system is about. The experiment in self-government has to continually be pushed forward and renewed by people who believe in it.
That's why we love America, because even a common person like not like myself, well, I'm too old now, but a young one growing up today who may be of the poorest of the poor can come up and be president of this great country of ours.
It's unique in the world.
Yeah.
You know, and when our system does not represent ordinary people in the way that it does today, you say, well, we're heading in a bad direction. We got to pull it back to make sure that that promise is always true in every generation.
Right. We got about 6 minutes left, so I just want to discuss one other thing with you. We have immigration coming in. Now, there's legal, what they say, illegals and legal immigration.
Sure.
I'm strictly for legal immigration. I'm a first-generation American. My mother and father came from overseas. They came here legally. The people that are here, most of them are here legally. What can we do to help the ones that are not here legally? Not to stay here, but to ship them back, but still help them.
It's a very difficult challenge because the laws under which people from those earlier generations came to the United States, if you had to qualify under current law, you might not have made it.
Right,
so,
because we had, oh, excuse me, Governor, we had to have someone sponsor you. You didn't come into this country unless someone would take care of you.
That's right. So it was different. Now, we've got a couple challenges happening right now in our country. So the first one is this issue of the children that have come to the border in Mexico.
Right, we don't want to antagonize them.
And this is, you know, and it's become an interesting political point. And I think the responsibility of leaders is to educate, not to rile people up. So the reality is that there was a law signed by President George W. Bush that said if you were a child coming into this country from Central America and you were unaccompanied, that you had to have a hearing before a judge to decide whether you were entitled to asylum in the United States. And because there's almost 60,000 that are there, it's overwhelmed the process. The children need a place to stay while the process plays out. And the federal government is asking the states, help us out. Like it does all the time when there's a catastrophe like Hurricane Katrina or other issues, states lend a hand. And that's one thing that I think the state of Massachusetts ought to be doing. Now,
excuse me, what I think we should be doing, these people that come from South America, through like Ecuador, Paraguay, Uruguay, they got to come through Mexico. We have to tell Mexicans that if they're coming through your country, you keep them back because they have to go through Mexico to get to our country.
Right.
And it's Mexico's job to take care of the immigrants, to let them go back to where they came from, and not to let them get as far as the Rio Grande.
Yeah, no, that part of it is a thorny problem of international relations.
I know that.
And how you work through it and the problems that are happening in those countries.
How would it felt if it was the other way around, though?
Right. Yeah. Well, people want to come here. You know, this is the Statue of Liberty.
Because of the freedom, right.
Yeah, give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses ready to breathe free. This is what our country is about.
I think Emma Lazarus said that. Was it Emma Lazarus?
I'm not sure who wrote it, but I know it's on the Statue of Liberty, and that's what our country is. So we need to, of course, need to have laws and an orderly process for handling people who come here. And there are people who are here who, through no fault of their own, were brought here as children and who identify themselves. I was at the Revere, the Sand Sculpting Festival, and I met a young man who has lived here since he was 4 years old and talks like a kid from Malden and identifies as American. But because he was brought here by his parents illegally at that point, he doesn't have status in the United States. What do? The humanity tells you, well, you need to make sure that there's a path for someone like him to make sure that he is integrated into our society and is treated as the American that he fundamentally is. He's not from another country. And there's a lot of people that are like that.
If you want to see America, you're right in the city here. We have
everything.
Everything from every place in the world right here. And by the way, the only real Americans, and we are all real Americans, by the way, but I mean the real Americans are the Native Americans. Everyone else came here.
We're all immigrants.
Immigrants.
We're all immigrants. We're all immigrants. And it's, you know, I have to say that in our political process, it's become very disjointed. I met a man at a parade. This was a July 4th parade I'll tell you the story. And I reached out my hand to say hi to him. I like to meet people at parades. And I said, "Hi, sir. I'm Evan Falchuk. I'm running for governor as an independent. Happy Independence Day." Now, who could possibly object to that? But this man, who was wearing an American flag shirt, crossed his arms and shook his head, said, "No." He said, I vote straight up and down for one party. And I said, "It's okay. You can still wish me Happy Independence Day." And he said, "No, I don't shake hands with the enemy." This is what's wrong with our country today. That shouldn't be acceptable behavior because we're all Americans.
Let me say one thing about Revere, because we only got about 2 minutes left. Excuse me. We just had the sandcastles down here. I was down the beach, and people that I spoke to, some of them came from Hawaii, some of them came from California, some of them came from Europe.
Yeah.
They were here on vacation. When they came down to Revere Beach to see our sandcastle, they were Chinese.
Yep.
They were not Indonesia, Malaysian.
Yep.
I shouldn't, well, with the
Yeah.
but from Malaysia.
Yep.
There was a couple of ones that came from the Soviet Union, and a lot of them from Italy. And they came down to Revere right here just to see the sandcastles, and they said it was beautiful. And before we close, Governor, we got about a minute left. Why don't you take it, then I'll finish up.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'm running for governor as an independent, founded the United Independent Party to bring smart, brave reform to our politics, economy, and government. Most voters are looking for that. Most voters believe that our politics should be representative of the things that most people want to see, which is that everyone is equal and everybody's civil rights have to be protected, and the government's got to spend our money wisely.
By the way, can I ask you, how many people are running for governor? I know there's Charlie Baker.
Yeah.
I know there's you.
Yep.
There's
all those other candidates are the second best candidates. They're all tied.
There's a gentleman, is it the Treasurer Grossman?
Yeah, there are 3 Democrats and there are 2 Republicans running. So they've got their primary in September. I'm on the ballot with my running mate Angus Jennings. We've earned a spot. We got our signatures. We'll be there in November. You can vote for the Falchuk Jennings ticket. And I tell you, you can read, if you go to the Falchuk2014.org website, lots of specific positions, which is what it's all about.
First of all, let me tell you, Governor, thank you for coming on the Revere TV Veterans and Community Show.
It's an honor.
I want to say God bless you.
Thank you.
And on your endeavor, I wish you the best of luck, no matter what you do.
Thank you, sir.
May God bless you again.
Thank you so much.
God bless the people of Revere. God bless our troops. But most of all, God bless our great country, the United States of America. And one more time, thank you, sir, for coming.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
It was an honor and a pleasure to have you.
Likewise. Thank you.